What's up, everyone? Before I dive into today's story, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll stick around until the end, because what I'm about to tell you will completely change how you think about love, family, and what it means to truly see someone for who they are. This isn't just another dating story. This is about the moment I realized I had been living my entire life completely wrong. So picture this. It's a regular Tuesday morning. I'm sitting in my apartment editing content when my phone buzzes with a DM notification. Now, I get hundreds of these every day, mostly from brands wanting partnerships or fans asking for advice. But this message was different. It was from a girl named Sarah, and she had been following me for almost 8 months. I remembered her username because she was always one of the first to like my posts, always leaving thoughtful comments, never anything weird or thirsty like some followers do. Her message was simple but direct. Hey, I know this might be forward, but I've been following your content for a while now, and I think you seem like a really genuine person. Would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime? I stared at that message for probably 10 minutes. Here's the thing about being an influencer that nobody talks about. Dating becomes incredibly complicated. You never know if someone likes you for you, or if they're just attracted to your follower count, your lifestyle, the persona you've created online. I've been burned before by people who were more interested in getting featured on my Instagram than actually getting to know me as a person. But something about Sarah's message felt different. Maybe it was the way she said I seemed genuine, or maybe I was just lonely. I'd been single for 6 months after my last relationship ended badly, and honestly, I was starting to wonder if I'd ever find someone who could see past the influencer thing and just connect with the real me. I was about to type back when I heard my apartment door open. "Hey bro, I'm here," came this excited voice from the hallway. "Jake. My little brother was visiting for the weekend, something we'd planned weeks ago. He lives about 2 hours away with our parents, and these weekend visits have become sacred to both of us. Now, I need to pause here and tell you about Jake because understanding him is crucial to understanding what happens next. Jake is 19, just 2 years younger than me, but in many ways, he sees the world through completely different eyes than I do. He's autistic, and while some people might see that as a limitation, I've learned over the years that it's actually his greatest strength. Jake experiences everything more intensely than most people. When he's happy, his whole body radiates joy. When he's excited about something, it's like watching pure enthusiasm in human form. And when he's passionate about his interests, which mainly revolve around trains and transportation systems, he becomes this incredible fountain of knowledge that can talk for hours about things most people never even think about. But here's what breaks my heart. Jake doesn't have many friends. Throughout high school, kids either ignored him or worse, they'd pretend to be his friend just to make fun of him later. He's been hurt so many times by people who couldn't see past his differences to recognize the amazing person he is underneath. So when Jake walked into my apartment that Tuesday, practically bouncing with excitement about spending the weekend together, I looked at Sarah's message again and felt this weird conflict. Part of me really wanted to meet her, to see if maybe this could be the start of something real. But another part of me didn't want to abandon Jake for some girl I'd never even met. That's when Jake, in his typical direct way, asked, "What are you looking at? You have that face you make when you're thinking really hard about something." I showed him the message, and his eyes got wide. "She wants to go on a date with you? That's so cool. You should totally go." His enthusiasm was infectious, but then his face fell slightly. "Oh, but it's our weekend together. I don't want to mess up your plans." And that's when I made a decision that would change everything. "What if you came with me?" I asked. "I mean, if she's really interested in getting to know me, she should meet the most important person in my life anyway, right?" Jake's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? You'd want me to come on your date? But won't that be weird?" I was already typing a response to Sarah before I could second-guess myself. "Hey, thanks for reaching out. I'd love to meet up for coffee. Quick question though. My little brother is visiting this weekend and he's pretty much my best friend. Would it be cool if he joined us? I promise he's awesome." I hit send before I could chicken out, then immediately started panicking. What if she said no? What if she thought I was some kind of weirdo who couldn't go on a date without bringing family members? What if this was my chance at something real and I just blew it? But Sarah's response came back within minutes. "Of course. I'd love to meet him. How about Saturday at 2 p.m. at that coffee place on 5th Street? I stared at that message, feeling this strange mix of excitement and nervousness. Jake was reading over my shoulder, and when he saw her response, he started doing this thing he does when he's really happy. He flaps his hands and rocks back and forth slightly. "She said yes. She actually wants to meet me too. Wants..." Looking back now, I realized that moment should have been my first clue that something unusual was happening. Most people, when you ask to bring your autistic brother on a first date, either politely decline or reluctantly agree while clearly being uncomfortable about it. But Sarah seemed genuinely excited about it. As Saturday approached, I found myself getting more and more nervous. But not for the reasons you might think. I wasn't worried about whether Sarah would like me. I was worried about whether she'd be kind to Jake. I'd seen too many people be fake nice to his face, and then make comments later, or worse, treat him like he was invisible or incapable of understanding what was happening around him. The night before our coffee date, Jake and I were hanging out on my couch, and he turned to me with this serious expression. "What if she doesn't like me?" he asked quietly. "What if I say something weird and embarrass you?" My heart broke a little bit. "Jake, you could never embarrass me. You're the best person I know. And if she doesn't see how amazing you are, then she's not worth my time anyway." But even as I said those words, I was silently praying that Sarah would be different. That maybe, just maybe, she'd be one of those rare people who could see Jake the way I see him. Not as someone to be pitied or tolerated, but as someone genuinely worth knowing. I had no idea that in less than 24 hours, everything I thought I knew about that situation would be turned completely upside down. Saturday morning arrived, and I woke up to the sound of Jake already moving around in my guest room. When I checked the time, it was barely 7 a.m., but I could hear him humming quietly to himself, which meant he was excited about something. Jake has this habit of waking up early when he's looking forward to something, and apparently meeting Sarah qualified as one of those occasions. I found him in my kitchen, already dressed and sitting at the counter with a bowl of cereal, scrolling through something on his phone. "Morning, bro," I said, grabbing some coffee. "You're up early." "I've been researching the coffee shop," he said without looking up, his voice carrying that focused tone he gets when he's deep into one of his interests. "Did you know that Fifth Street Coffee has been in business for 12 years? They source their beans from 3 different countries, and their building used to be a bookstore in the 1980s. This is classic Jake. When he's nervous or excited about going somewhere new, he researches everything about it beforehand. It's his way of feeling prepared and comfortable. Most people might find it excessive, but I've learned it's actually brilliant. Jake walks into new situations armed with knowledge that helps him feel confident. That's really cool, Jake. Did you find anything else interesting?" I asked, genuinely curious. Over the years, I've discovered that Jake's research often uncovers fascinating details that I would never think to look up. His eyes lit up. "The coffee shop is only 2 blocks from Central Station." I looked up the train schedule, and there's a really interesting express line that runs right underneath the building. The vibrations from the trains actually help with the coffee grinding process because it creates a natural agitation. I couldn't help but smile. Only Jake would discover the connection between subway trains and coffee quality. But as I watched him talk, I noticed something else in his expression. Underneath the excitement, there was this underlying nervousness that he was trying to hide. "Jake, are you okay about today? I mean, really okay?" I asked, sitting down next to him. He was quiet for a moment, stirring his cereal even though it didn't need stirring. "What if I talk too much about trains? What if she thinks I'm boring? What if she's only being nice because you asked her to be?" My chest tightened hearing him say that. This is the reality of being autistic in a world that doesn't always understand or appreciate neurodivergent minds. Jake has learned to question whether people genuinely enjoy his company, or if they're just tolerating him out of politeness. It's heartbreaking because Jake is one of the most interesting, kind, and genuine people I've ever known, but he's been conditioned to believe that his natural way of being is somehow wrong, or too much. "Listen to me," I said, turning to face him fully. "You are not boring. Your passion for trains and transportation is incredible. The way your mind works, the connections you make, the details you notice that other people miss, that's not something to hide or apologize for. That's what makes you special." Jake looked up at me with those big, earnest eyes that have always been able to see straight through any pretense. "But what if she doesn't understand that? What if she's like the kids at school who used to pretend to listen and then laugh about it later?" That hit me like a punch to the gut. I remembered those kids from Jake's high school. I remembered the phone calls from our mom about Jake coming home confused and hurt because someone had convinced him they wanted to hear about his latest train route discovery, only to mock him behind his back. I remembered the way Jake's confidence had slowly eroded over those years, how he'd started apologizing for his interests before even sharing them. "Jake, if Sarah is that kind of person, then this date ends immediately, and we come home and order pizza and watch train documentaries all night." But I don't think she is. Something about her messages felt different, more genuine. He nodded slowly. but I could see he was still processing his anxiety. "Can I tell you something?" he asked quietly. "Always. I've never been on a date before. I mean, I know this isn't technically my date, but I've never even been around when someone was on a date. I don't really know how to act or what to say." The vulnerability in his voice almost broke me. Here was my brilliant, wonderful brother, convinced that he needed to perform or pretend to be someone else just to be acceptable to a stranger. It made me angry at a world that had taught him to feel this way, but it also made me more determined than ever to protect him from any more of that kind of hurt. "You know what, Jake? You don't need to act like anyone other than yourself. The right person will appreciate you exactly as you are. And if Sarah doesn't, then she's not the right person for me either." As we got ready to leave, I watched Jake check his appearance in the mirror multiple times, adjusting his shirt and running his hands through his hair. He'd chosen his favorite blue button-down, the one that brings out his eyes, and he looked genuinely handsome. But more than that, despite his nervousness, there was an excitement radiating from him that I hadn't seen in months. "You know what I'm most excited about?" he said, as we walked toward the coffee shop. "What's that?" "Getting to meet one of your friends. I know you have lots of followers and people who watch your videos, but I don't really get to meet the people who actually know you. You know? It feels special that she wanted to meet me, too." My heart clenched. Jake had no idea that Sarah was essentially a stranger to me, that this was our first time meeting in person. In his mind, she was already my friend, someone important enough that her opinion of him mattered. The pressure I felt to make sure this went well intensified tenfold. As we approached the coffee shop, I could see Jake's nervous energy increasing. He started doing his hand-flapping thing, which usually means he's either really excited or really anxious, sometimes both. "What if I can't think of anything to say?" he asked suddenly. "Then you listen. You're an amazing listener, Jake. And if you want to share something about trains or anything else you're interested in, you share it. The right person will want to hear it." But even as I said those reassuring words, I was battling my own anxiety. What if I was wrong about Sarah? What if she was polite to Jake's face but uncomfortable underneath? What if this whole thing was a mistake that would end up hurting the person I cared about most in the world? We were about to find out, and I had no idea that everything I thought I knew about this situation was about to be completely shattered. The moment we walked through the door of 5th Street Coffee, I spotted Sarah immediately. She was sitting at a corner table, and honestly, she looked even better than her Instagram photos. Long, dark hair, bright smile, wearing this casual but put-together outfit that somehow managed to look effortless and intentional at the same time. She was scrolling through her phone, occasionally glancing toward the entrance, clearly waiting for us. I felt that familiar flutter of first-date nerves mixed with excitement. This was it. This was the moment where I'd find out if the connection I'd felt through our messages would translate to real life. I straightened my shoulders, put on my most confident smile, and started walking toward her table with Jake beside me. But then something happened that I will never, and I mean never, forget as long as I live. Sarah looked up, saw us approaching, and her face absolutely lit up. But here's the thing that made my brain completely short-circuit. She wasn't looking at me. Her eyes went straight to Jake, and this expression of pure joy crossed her face like she'd just spotted her best friend after months apart. She stood up from her table, and I'm thinking, okay, she's being polite. She's going to greet us both. I'm already extending my hand for a handshake or preparing for one of those awkward first-date hugs when Sarah does something that stops me dead in my tracks. She walks right past me. I'm talking completely past me, like I'm not even there, like I'm invisible, and goes directly to Jake. "Hi." "You must be Jake," she says, and her voice has this genuine warmth that you absolutely cannot fake. "I'm Sarah. I've heard so much about you, and I've been really looking forward to meeting you." I'm standing there, literally frozen, watching this interaction unfold. Jake, who had been nervous and fidgety during our entire walk over, suddenly stops his hand flapping and looks up at Sarah with this expression of complete surprise. You have to understand, this never happens to Jake. People don't usually approach him first. They don't usually seem excited to meet him, and they definitely don't usually ignore his more socially prominent older brother to focus entirely on him. You wanted to meet me?" Jake asks, and there's this vulnerability in his voice that makes my chest tight. "But I'm just his little brother." "Just his little brother?" Sarah repeats, and she sounds genuinely incredulous. "From everything I've seen, you're pretty amazing. I heard you know everything about the train system here. That's incredible." And that's when Jake's whole demeanor changes. His eyes light up in a way I haven't seen in months, and he starts talking. "Well, I wouldn't say everything, but I do know most of the routes." Did you know that the express line that runs under this building has been operating since 1952? The original blueprints show. I'm watching this conversation happen, and I'm experiencing this weird mix of emotions that I can't even begin to process. Part of me is confused because this is supposed to be my date, and Sarah hasn't even acknowledged my existence yet. Part of me is suspicious because who ignores the person they asked out to focus on their autistic brother? But there's another part of me, a bigger part, that's watching Jake's face absolutely glow with happiness as someone shows genuine interest in the things he's passionate about. Sarah is asking follow-up questions. Real questions. Not the polite, surface-level stuff that people usually do when they're trying to be nice to Jake. She's asking about train schedules, about the history of the subway system, about his favorite routes. And Jake is answering with this enthusiasm that's making other customers in the coffee shop turn and smile because his joy is literally infectious. After about 5 minutes of this, I finally clear my throat. Should we maybe sit down and order some coffee? Sarah turns to me then, and for the first time since we walked in, she actually makes eye contact with me. Oh, yes, of course. I'm sorry. I got carried away. But even as she's apologizing to me, she's still primarily focused on Jake. Jake, what's your favorite drink here? I looked at the menu online, but I'd love to hear your recommendation. We get our drinks and settle at the table, and I'm trying to figure out what the hell is happening. This is the weirdest first date I've ever been on, and that's saying something, because I've been on some pretty weird first dates. Sarah is sitting across from both of us, but she's angled toward Jake, asking him about his week, about what he likes to do for fun, about his interests beyond trains. And Jake is absolutely thriving. He's making more eye contact than I've seen him make with a stranger in years. He's laughing at her jokes. He's even asking her questions, which is huge for Jake because social anxiety usually makes him more of a listener than a participant in conversations. So Sarah, I finally interject, because I'm starting to feel like a third wheel on my own date. Tell us about yourself. What do you do for work? She answers, but briefly, and then immediately turns back to Jake. Jake, your brother mentioned in one of his videos that you're thinking about working in transportation someday. What kind of job would you want? Wait, hold up. She mentioned my videos. Specifically, she mentioned something I said about Jake in my videos. I'm trying to remember when I talked about Jake's career aspirations, and then it hits me. It was in a video I posted about 3 months ago. Just a casual day-in-my-life vlog where Jake was visiting, and we were talking about his future plans. It was maybe a 30-second conversation in a 15-minute video, but Sarah remembered it. She remembered this tiny detail about my brother's dreams from a video that most people probably skipped through to get to the more entertaining parts. That's when the pieces started clicking together in my brain, and I felt this cold realization wash over me. Sarah wasn't here for me. She hadn't asked me out because she was interested in dating me. She had asked me out because it was the only way she could think of to meet Jake. I'm sitting there having this revelation while watching my brother talk to this girl about his dream of becoming a train conductor, and I don't know whether to be offended, impressed, or concerned. On one hand, I feel like I've been used, manipulated into facilitating this meeting under false pretenses. On the other hand, I'm watching Jake be happier and more confident than I've seen him in months. Excuse me for a second, I say, standing up from the table. I'm going to grab some napkins. I walk over to the counter, but really I just need a moment to process what's happening. I'm looking back at the table where Sarah and Jake are deep in conversation about the differences between subway systems in different cities, and Jake is using his hands to illustrate his points, completely animated and engaged. And that's when I realize something that changes everything. I don't care that this isn't really my date. I don't care that Sarah used me to get to Jake. What I care about is that my brother, who has spent most of his life feeling like he's too different, too much too weird for people to genuinely like, is sitting at that table feeling valued and interesting and worthy of someone's time and attention. But I also know that I need to understand what Sarah's real intentions are. Because if she's playing some kind of game, or if this is some elaborate setup for a cruel joke, I will shut it down immediately. Jake has been hurt enough by people who pretended to care about him. When I get back to the table, I make a decision. I'm going to find out exactly what Sarah's deal is, even if it means confronting her directly. Because my brother's heart is on the line here, and that's more important than my ego or my confusion about this whole situation. What happens next will either restore my faith in humanity or break my heart completely. When I returned to the table, Jake was in the middle of explaining something about train signal systems, using sugar packets to demonstrate how different routes intersect. Sarah was leaning forward, completely absorbed, asking questions that showed she was actually following his explanation. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed answers, and I needed them now. "Sarah," I said, sitting back down and trying to keep my voice casual, "can I ask you something? How did you first find my content?" She looked up from Jake's sugar packet demonstration, and for just a split second, I saw something flicker across her face. Panic, maybe. Or guilt. "Oh, I think it was through the algorithm. You know how it is with social media." That was a non-answer, and we all knew it. Jake, bless him, was completely oblivious to the tension and continued arranging sugar packets. But I pressed on. "Which video was it? I'm always curious about what draws people in initially." Sarah's cheeks turned pink, and she glanced at Jake before looking back at me. "I honestly don't remember the specific video. It was a while ago." Now I knew she was lying. People always remember their first video from a creator they end up following closely. Always. And Sarah had been following me for 8 months, commenting consistently, clearly paying attention to details. She definitely remembered. Was it one of my travel vlogs? Or maybe a day in the life video? I kept pushing, watching her squirm. "Actually," Jake suddenly piped up, completely unaware he was about to blow up Sarah's cover, "didn't you mention earlier that you saw the video where we talked about my job plans? That was the one from when I visited in March, remember? We were sitting on your balcony and I was telling you about the conductor training program." Sarah's face went completely red. Jake had just revealed that not only did she remember specific videos, but she remembered details from a video that was mostly about me. Except for that brief conversation with Jake, the silence stretched between us for what felt like forever. Jake finally looked up from his sugar packets, sensing the tension. "Did I say something wrong?" "No, Jake. You didn't say anything wrong," I said gently, then turned back to Sarah. "But I think Sarah has something she wants to tell us. Don't you, Sarah?" She looked absolutely mortified, glancing between Jake and me like she was trying to figure out how to escape this situation. Finally, she took a deep breath and said, "Can we talk privately for a minute?" I looked at Jake, who was starting to look confused and worried. "It's okay, bro. We'll be right back. Why don't you look up the train schedule for this afternoon? Maybe we can take a ride somewhere." His face brightened at that suggestion, and he immediately pulled out his phone. Sarah and I walked over to a quiet corner of the coffee shop near the windows. "Okay," I said, crossing my arms. "What's really going on here? And please don't lie to me again, because my brother's feelings are involved now." Sarah looked down at her hands, and when she looked back up, there were tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry. You're right. I wasn't completely honest about how I found your content or why I reached out. So tell me the truth." She took a shaky breath. "I found your channel because I was researching autism. My cousin was recently diagnosed, and I was trying to understand more about it. I came across one of your videos where Jake was helping you with something, and I was amazed by him. I felt my defensive posture soften slightly, but I wasn't ready to let my guard down completely." "Amazed how?" "The way he explained things, the way his mind worked, the way he saw details that you completely missed. And then I started watching more of your videos. Not for your content, but hoping Jake would appear in them. Every time he did, I found myself smiling. He seemed so genuine, so passionate about his interests, so kind." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I know this sounds crazy, but I developed this huge crush on someone I'd never met. And I know that's weird and probably inappropriate, but I couldn't stop thinking about him. The way he gets excited about trains, the way he explains things with such detail and care, the way he looks at the world differently than everyone else." I stared at her, trying to process what she was telling me. "So you asked me out to get to him?" "I didn't know how else to meet him," she said, her voice cracking. "I couldn't just slide into your DMs asking about your autistic brother. That would have been creepy and invasive. But I thought if I got to know you, maybe eventually I could meet him naturally. Before you think about what happens next, I need you to do something for me. If this story is hitting you in the feels, if you're invested in what happens to Jake and Sarah, please hit that subscribe button right now. Seriously, pause the video and subscribe, because what happens next is going to blow your mind, and I want to make sure you don't miss the rest of this incredible journey. Also, smash that like button if you're Team Jake, and let me know in the comments if you've ever had feelings for someone you'd never actually met. Share this video with someone who believes in unexpected love stories, because trust me, this is just getting started." Looking at Sarah's tear-stained face, I felt my anger melting away and being replaced by something else entirely. This wasn't some cruel joke or manipulation. This was a girl who had fallen for my brother's authentic self, who had seen past his autism to recognize the incredible person he is. Sarah, I said quietly, Jake has been hurt before by people who pretended to be interested in him. If you're not serious about this, if this is just some curiosity or experiment, please walk away now, because he's already starting to care about you, and I won't let anyone break his heart. She looked me straight in the eyes. I would never hurt him. I know we just met, but I've been thinking about him for months. I've watched him in your videos and seen how kind he is, how smart he is, how passionate he is about the things he loves. I don't want to hurt him. I want to get to know him. I studied her face, looking for any sign of deception, any hint that this was anything other than genuine. All I saw was sincerity and hope, and a nervousness that matched exactly how Jake had looked that morning. Okay, I said finally, but we're going to do this right. You're going to be honest with him about how you found out about him, and you're going to let him decide if he wants to get to know you better. She nodded eagerly. Yes, absolutely. I want to be completely honest with him. As we walked back to the table, I had no idea that the conversation we were about to have would change all of our lives forever. When we got back to the table, Jake looked up from his phone with this bright, expectant expression. He had pulled up a train schedule and was practically vibrating with excitement. I found the perfect route for this afternoon. There's a scenic line that goes along the river, and it connects to 3 different historic stations. We could make a whole adventure out of it. The pure joy on his face made my chest tight. Here he was, planning an adventure for the 3 of us, completely unaware that the girl sitting across from him had orchestrated this entire meeting just to get close to him. I looked at Sarah, who was staring at Jake with this expression that I can only describe as tender amazement, like she couldn't believe he was real. Jake, I said gently, before we make any plans, Sarah has something she wants to tell you. Something important. Jake's expression immediately shifted to concern. Did I do something wrong? I know I was talking a lot about trains. I'm sorry if I was being too much. No, Sarah said quickly, reaching across the table like she wanted to touch his hand, but stopping herself. No, Jake, you weren't being too much at all. You were being perfect. That's actually what I need to tell you. Jake looked confused, glancing between Sarah and me. I don't understand. Sarah took a deep breath, and I could see her hands shaking slightly. Jake, I need to be completely honest with you about something. I didn't ask your brother out because I was interested in dating him. The confusion on Jake's face deepened. You didn't? I asked him out because it was the only way I could think of to meet you. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake just stared at her, blinking slowly, like he was trying to process information that didn't compute. You wanted to meet me? He said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I've been following your brother's content for months, but not really for his content. I was hoping to see you in his videos. Every time you appeared, even for just a few seconds, it made my whole day better. Jake's eyes were getting wider and wider. But why would you want to see me? I'm autistic. Most people think I'm weird. Jake, Sarah said, and her voice was so gentle it almost broke my heart. I don't think you're weird at all. I think you're incredible. The way you explain things, the way you get excited about trains, the way your mind works. It's amazing. I've never met anyone like you. I watched Jake's face cycle through about 10 different emotions in the span of 5 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, hope, fear, and something else I couldn't quite identify. You're saying you wanted to meet me specifically? Not just because I'm his brother? Specifically you, Sarah confirmed. I know this probably sounds crazy, and I know I went about it in a really roundabout way, but I couldn't stop thinking about you. I wanted to know what you were like when you weren't just appearing in someone else's video. I wanted to hear you talk about the things you're passionate about. I wanted to get to know the real you. Jake was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his hands. When he looked back up, there were tears in his eyes. People don't usually want to get to know the real me, he said quietly. The real me talks too much about trains and gets excited about things other people think are boring. The real me stims when I'm nervous and sometimes says the wrong thing in social situations. The real you sounds perfect to me, Sarah said without hesitation. That's when Jake started crying. Not sobbing, just quiet tears rolling down his cheeks. I've never had someone say that before, he whispered. I felt my own eyes getting watery watching this interaction. You have to understand. I've spent years watching Jake doubt himself, watching him apologize for being who he is, watching him dim his natural enthusiasm, because he's learned that most people find it overwhelming or annoying. And here was this girl, telling him that all the things he's been taught to hide about himself were exactly what drew her to him. Jake, Sarah continued, I know this is a lot to process, and I know we just met in person today. But I was wondering if maybe you'd like to hang out sometime? Just the two of us? Maybe you could show me some of those train routes you were talking about. Jake looked at me with this expression of complete bewilderment. She wants to hang out with me, he said, like he couldn't quite believe it. Just me. Not because she feels sorry for me, or because someone told her to be nice to me. Because she actually wants to. That's exactly right, Sarah said. What if I'm boring? What if I talk too much about trains and you get tired of listening? Sarah leaned forward, and this time she did reach across the table to gently touch Jake's hand. Jake, I could listen to you talk about trains for hours. I could listen to you talk about anything for hours. Your passion is contagious. When you get excited about something, it makes me excited about it too, even if I've never cared about it before. Jake stared down at their joined hands like he couldn't quite believe it was real. I've never been on a date before, he admitted quietly. Then we'll figure it out together, Sarah said. We can go as slow as you want. We can do whatever makes you comfortable. I watched this exchange feeling this incredible mix of emotions. Part of me was amazed by Sarah's sincerity and the way she was handling this conversation. Part of me was protective, still worried that somehow this would end up hurting Jake. But mostly, I was overwhelmed by the sight of my brother experiencing something I'd never seen him experience before. Someone choosing him, specifically him, not despite his autism but because of who he is as a complete person. Can I ask you something? Jake said to Sarah. Anything. Why me? I mean, really why? You could probably date anyone you wanted. Why would you want to date someone like me? Sarah was quiet for a moment, like she was really thinking about how to answer. Do you know what I noticed about you in those videos? You never pretended to be anything other than exactly who you are. You never tried to hide your interests or tone down your enthusiasm. You never apologized for taking up space or for caring deeply about things. In a world where everyone is constantly performing some version of themselves, you were just genuinely, authentically you. That's incredibly rare, Jake. That's incredibly beautiful. Jake was crying again, but this time he was also smiling. I want to go on a date with you, he said. I want to show you the train routes, and tell you about all the stations, and maybe take you to the transportation museum if you want. I would love that more than anything, Sarah said. And that's when I realized that what I was witnessing wasn't just the beginning of a potential relationship. I was watching my brother discover that he was worthy of being chosen, worthy of being wanted exactly as he is. I was watching him realize that his differences weren't flaws to be hidden, but gifts to be celebrated. But what happened next would test everything we thought we knew about love, acceptance, and what it means to truly see someone for who they are. What happened next was something I never could have predicted. And honestly, it changed my entire perspective on what love actually looks like when it's real and unfiltered. Jake wiped his eyes and looked at Sarah with this expression of pure vulnerability. If we're going to do this, if we're really going to try dating, I need you to know some things about me first. Things that might make you change your mind. Sarah squeezed his hand gently. Tell me anything you want to tell me. Jake took a shaky breath. Sometimes I have meltdowns when things get too overwhelming. Not like tantrums, but actual meltdowns where I can't speak or think clearly, and I need to be alone in a quiet space. Sometimes I stim in ways that other people think are weird. I flap my hands or rock back and forth or make sounds. Sometimes I miss social cues and say the wrong thing at the wrong time. He paused, looking down at their joined hands. I have very specific routines that help me feel safe, and if those routines get disrupted, it can ruin my whole day. I have foods I can't eat because of texture issues. I have sounds that physically hurt me. I need more time to process information than most people. And sometimes I need you to be very direct with me, because I don't understand hints or subtle communication. My heart was breaking listening to him list all these things like they were warnings, like they were reasons someone might not want to be with him. This is what years of rejection and misunderstanding had taught him, that his neurological differences were obstacles to overcome rather than just part of who he is. And, Jake continued, his voice getting smaller, I might love you too intensely. When I care about someone, I care with my whole heart. I might want to text you too much or see you too often or talk about you constantly. I might remember every single thing you tell me and bring it up weeks later. I might notice details about you that other people wouldn't notice. Some people find that overwhelming. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and I could see Jake starting to panic in the silence. His free hand started flapping slightly, and he was beginning to pull away from her touch. Jake, Sarah said finally, can I tell you what I heard when you said all of that? He nodded, not trusting his voice. I heard that you're someone who feels deeply and loves completely. I heard that you're honest about your needs and brave enough to communicate them clearly. I heard that you pay attention to details and remember things that matter. I heard that you have coping strategies that help you navigate a world that isn't always designed for people like you. She paused, looking directly into his eyes. I didn't hear anything that would make me want to run away. I heard things that make me want to learn how to love you better. Jake's eyes filled with tears again. You want to learn how to love me? I want to learn everything about you. I want to know what helps you feel safe and what makes you uncomfortable. I want to know your routines so I can respect them. I want to understand your stims so I never make you feel like you need to hide them around me. I want to know how you communicate best so I can meet you where you are. I'm sitting there watching this conversation and I'm realizing that I'm witnessing something extraordinary. Sarah wasn't just accepting Jake's autism. She was embracing it as an integral part of who he is. She wasn't looking at his differences as challenges to overcome, but as aspects of his personality to understand and appreciate. But what if I have a meltdown in front of you? Jake asked quietly. Then I'll make sure you have space and quiet, and I'll be there when you're ready, Sarah replied without hesitation. What if I stim in public and people stare? Then let them stare. I'll be too busy being proud to be with you to care what strangers think. What if I talk too much about trains? Sarah smiled. Then I'll learn everything there is to know about trains, because anything that makes you that happy is something I want to understand. Jake was crying openly now, but he was also smiling bigger than I'd seen him smile in years. I've never had anyone say things like that to me before. Well, get used to it, Sarah said gently, because I plan on saying things like that to you a lot. That's when Jake did something that surprised all of us. He stood up from his chair, walked around the table and hugged Sarah. Not a quick, polite hug, but a real, full-body hug that lasted for several seconds. Jake doesn't usually initiate physical contact with people he's just met, but something about Sarah made him feel safe enough to be vulnerable in that way. When he sat back down, he was beaming. So when can we go on our first real date? How about next Saturday? Sarah suggested. You can plan the whole thing. Show me your favorite train route. Take me to places that are special to you. I want to see the city through your eyes. Really? You want me to plan it? I can't think of anyone I'd rather trust with planning the perfect day. Jake immediately pulled out his phone and started making notes, his excitement palpable. Okay, so we could start at Central Station, take the blue line to the historic district, then transfer to the green line, which has the best views of the river, and then we could end at the Transportation Museum, which has this incredible exhibit on vintage subway cars. As Jake planned their date with the enthusiasm of someone planning a royal wedding, I caught Sarah's eye. She was watching him with this expression of pure adoration, like she couldn't believe her luck in finding someone so passionate and genuine. And that's when I realized that what I was witnessing wasn't just the beginning of a relationship. I was watching two people discover that love doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to find someone who celebrates who you already are. But the real test of their connection was still to come, and it would happen sooner than any of us expected. The week between that coffee shop conversation and Jake and Sarah's first official date was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Jake was transformed. I'm talking about a complete personality shift that was both beautiful and slightly overwhelming to witness. He called me every single day, sometimes multiple times, to update me on his date planning progress. I've mapped out the entire route, he told me on Tuesday. I calculated the exact timing so we can catch the 2:15 express train, which has the newest cars and the best sound system for the announcements. And I found out that the Transportation Museum has a special exhibit on historic signal systems that's only running for 2 more weeks. But it wasn't just the logistical planning that showed how much this meant to him. Jake started doing things I'd never seen him do before. He asked our mom to take him shopping for new clothes. He researched conversation topics beyond trains, asking me questions like, what do people usually talk about on dates? And how do you know if someone is having a good time? The vulnerability in those questions broke my heart because they revealed how little experience Jake had with this kind of social interaction. But they also showed how desperately he wanted to make Sarah happy. On Thursday, he called me in a panic. What if she changes her mind? What if she realizes that dating an autistic person is too complicated? What if she was just being nice at the coffee shop and doesn't actually want to go through with this? I could hear the fear in his voice, that deep-seated terror that comes from years of being disappointed by people who initially seemed accepting, but eventually decided he was too much work. Jake, did you see the way she looked at you? Did you hear the things she said? That wasn't politeness. That was genuine interest. But what if I mess it up? What if I do something wrong and she never wants to see me again? This is the reality that neurotypical people often don't understand about dating someone who's autistic. It's not just about navigating social situations. It's about overcoming years of conditioning that tells you you're fundamentally unlovable because of how your brain works. Listen to me, I told him. Sarah chose you. Not some version of you that you think she wants, but the real you. The you who gets excited about train schedules and knows random facts about subway systems. She chose that person. Trust her choice. Saturday morning arrived, and Jake showed up at my apartment 2 hours before he was supposed to meet Sarah. He was wearing his new outfit, dark jeans, a button-down shirt in his favorite shade of blue, and sneakers that he'd spent an hour researching to make sure they'd be comfortable for walking. He looked handsome, but more importantly, he looked confident. "How do I look?" he asked, doing a little spin in my living room. "You look perfect, bro. Sarah is going to be blown away." But as the time got closer for him to leave, I could see his anxiety building. He started stimming more frequently, flapping his hands and pacing around my apartment. What if I talk too much? What if I don't talk enough? What if she gets bored? What if I have a meltdown? "Jake, stop," I said, putting my hands on his shoulders. "You're spiraling. Take a deep breath with me." We did some breathing exercises that our mom had taught us years ago when Jake first started having anxiety attacks. Slowly, I watched him calm down. "You know what?" I said suddenly. "I'm going to drive you to the station." "You don't have to do that. I want to. And I want to see Sarah's face when she sees you, because I have a feeling it's going to be pretty amazing." We got to Central Station 15 minutes early, and Jake immediately started pointing out architectural details and explaining the history of the building. It was his way of managing his nerves, and I could see it was working. By the time Sarah arrived, he was in his element, confident and knowledgeable about his surroundings. When Sarah walked through the main entrance, I watched Jake's entire face light up. But what really got me was Sarah's reaction. The moment she spotted Jake, her face broke into this radiant smile, and she actually started walking faster, like she couldn't wait to get to him. "Jake!" she called out, and he turned toward her voice with this expression of pure joy. They met in the middle of the station concourse, and Sarah did something that made my chest tight with emotion. She hugged him immediately, a real hug that lasted several seconds, and when they pulled apart, she kept her hands on his arms like she didn't want to completely let go of him. "You look amazing," she told him, and Jake's cheeks turned pink with pleasure. "You look beautiful," he replied, and then immediately started blushing deeper. "I mean, you always look beautiful, but today you look especially beautiful, and I'm really excited to show you everything I planned." Sarah laughed, but not in a way that made fun of his earnestness. She laughed like someone who was delighted by his honesty. "I'm excited too. I've been looking forward to this all week." I watched them walk toward the ticket machines, Jake explaining the different fare options and Sarah listening with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she was actually paying attention. As they disappeared into the crowd of weekend commuters, I felt this overwhelming sense of rightness about the whole situation. But what I didn't know was that their date was about to include a moment that would test everything Sarah had said about accepting Jake exactly as he is. About 3 hours later, I got a text from Jake, having the best day ever. Sarah loves trains almost as much as I do now, taking her to the museum next. Then, an hour after that, something happened. "Can you come pick us up at the museum?" "I'm okay, but I need to go home." My heart dropped. I immediately called him, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried Sarah's number, which Jake had given me earlier, and she answered on the first ring. "Is Jake okay?" I asked immediately. "He's okay," Sarah said, but I could hear something in her voice. "He had a meltdown at the museum. It's over now, but he's exhausted and wants to go home. Can you come get us?" "I'm on my way." "What happened?" "I'll explain when you get here. But I need you to know, this doesn't change anything for me. If anything, it makes me care about him more." As I drove to the museum, my mind was racing with worry and questions. Jake's meltdowns were rare, but when they happened, they were intense and left him feeling vulnerable and ashamed. I was terrified that this experience would undo all the confidence and happiness he'd built up over the past week. What I found when I got there would either prove that Sarah was everything she claimed to be, or reveal that even the best intentions couldn't survive the reality of loving someone whose brain works differently than most people's. When I arrived at the Transportation Museum, I found Jake and Sarah sitting on a bench outside the building. Jake was rocking slightly back and forth, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, staring at the ground. Sarah was sitting close enough to offer comfort but far enough away to give him space. and she was speaking to him in low, soothing tones. The moment Jake saw me, his face crumpled. "I ruined everything," he said, his voice thick with tears. "I had a meltdown in front of everyone, and now Sarah knows how broken I am." My heart shattered hearing him say that. "Jake, you're not broken. You never have been." "But I scared her," he whispered. "I scared everyone in there." I looked at Sarah, who was watching Jake with this expression of fierce protectiveness. "What happened?" I asked her quietly. "The museum was more crowded than we expected," she explained. "There was this group of teenagers who kept getting louder and louder, and the fluorescent lights were flickering in one of the exhibit halls. Jake was trying so hard to push through it because he wanted to show me this specific train car he'd been excited about all week." She paused, glancing at Jake with such tenderness it took my breath away. I could see he was getting overwhelmed, but I didn't know how to help. Then someone bumped into him really hard, and he couldn't handle any more input. He started crying and stimming really intensely, and some people started staring and whispering. "I made a scene," Jake said miserably. "Everyone was looking at me like I was some kind of freak." "No," Sarah said firmly, turning to face him fully. "You had a completely normal response to sensory overload. Your brain was protecting you the only way it knew how." Jake looked up at her with surprise. "You're not embarrassed? You're not going to tell everyone about how weird I am?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Jake, listen to me very carefully. What I saw in there wasn't weird or embarrassing. What I saw was someone I care about struggling with something that's genuinely difficult. And then I saw how hard you tried to recover because you didn't want to disappoint me." She reached out and gently took his hand. "Do you know what you did after your meltdown? You apologized to me. Not because you'd done anything wrong, but because you were worried about how it affected me. You put my feelings before your own recovery, and that broke my heart, because it meant you still don't understand how much I care about you." Jake was staring at her like he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. "You still want to be here? Even after seeing me like that?" "Jake, I don't want to be anywhere else. What happened in there didn't make me think less of you. It made me want to learn how to support you better. It made me want to be the kind of person you feel safe having meltdowns around." I watched my brother's face transform as Sarah's words sank in. For the first time in his life, someone had witnessed him at his most vulnerable and chosen to stay. "But what if it happens again?" Jake asked quietly. "Then we'll handle it together," Sarah said without hesitation. "We'll figure out your triggers, we'll plan for overwhelming situations, and when you need to leave or take a break, we'll leave or take a break. Your needs aren't inconveniences, Jake. They're just information that helps me love you better." Jake started crying again, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. I've never had anyone say that to me before. "Well, get used to it," Sarah said, echoing what she'd told him at the coffee shop. "Because I plan on saying things like that to you for a very long time." That's when Jake did something that surprised all of us. He looked at Sarah and said, "I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest, and completely unguarded. Sarah's breath caught, and for a moment, I thought she might start crying too. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered back. Sitting there on that bench outside the Transportation Museum, watching my brother experience unconditional acceptance for the first time in his life, I realized that I was witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't just a love story. This was a story about what happens when someone sees past society's narrow definitions of normal and chooses to love the whole person, including the parts that make them different. 3 months later, Jake and Sarah are still together, and their relationship has taught me more about love than any of my own relationships ever have. Sarah has learned Jake's routines, his triggers, his communication style. Jake has learned to trust that his autism isn't something to hide or apologize for. Together, they've created this beautiful partnership built on acceptance, understanding, and genuine appreciation for each other's differences. Jake is happier than I've ever seen him. He's more confident, more willing to try new things, more comfortable being himself in public. And Sarah has become part of our family in the most natural way possible. But the most incredible part? Jake has started advocating for himself in ways he never did before. He's learned that his needs matter, that his boundaries are valid, that he deserves to be loved exactly as he is. Sarah didn't just give him a girlfriend. She gave him the gift of self-acceptance. If this story has touched your heart, if it's changed how you think about love or autism, or what it means to truly accept someone, please hit that subscribe button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that everyone deserves love exactly as they are. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of authentic connection. And let me know in the comments about a time when someone surprised you by choosing to see the best in you. Don't forget to ring that notification bell because Jake and Sarah's story is still being written, and I'll be sharing updates on their journey. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that teach us that being different isn't a flaw to overcome, but a gift to be celebrated. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.